Hello, everybody. It's Lenny Murphy, continuing with our Leadership CEO series. And today I am joined by Nikki Lavoie. Nikki, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
So we were chatting beforehand that somehow we have never spoken of all these years of paths kind of overlapping and being adjacent and connecting, but this is a first. So I'm really glad to finally have the opportunity.
Likewise, yeah. I kind of picture it in my mind as like a Venn diagram that's been slowly coming, converging a little bit more until this moment in time when we finally connect.
Does it feel like, the stars have aligned? Is there some type of, ooh,
Yeah, it's like that. It's almost like, I've heard so much about you and I've seen obviously so much of, the impact of the many things that you do. And so now it's sort of like, okay, it feels a bit weird actually, I must say, to be being interviewed by you. I sort of feel like it should be the other way around, but okay.
no, no. All right, yeah, we are definitely going to be friends because you've got the gift of bullshit too, Nikki. So,
Tell no
the
one.
I think it takes a fair amount to be successful in this industry. So, and especially to do all the
Indeed.
things that you do, because you are definitely a mover and shaker. So let's start there. Why don't you talk about yourself and what you do in the industry and MindSpark and counsel and all of those things, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Oh man, that's a tough thing to, it's always tough for people to talk about themselves. Maybe I could start by telling a little bit of my story and how MindSpark was
Please,
born, and then we can go from
please.
there.
Yes, sounds great.
Yeah, so I am originally from the Northeast of the United States. I worked for a couple of research consulting agencies that are based out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. A couple of them are pretty well known to the IIEX circuit, like Sentient Decision Science with Aaron Reed, my former boss.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I was working out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, based in Boston, and just happened to go to an SMR event where it just so happened that I sat down next to somebody that was running a French market research agency and said, "Hey, how would you like to come and work for my team?" And I was thinking, like, is this the next episode of Taken? Am I about to be kidnapped because I'm going to go? I've got offered a job by a random person in Paris that I don't even know. And I was, I have to say, I was pretty unsure. Like, is this a real person? Is this a real job? Is this a real company? And lo and behold, when I went back from that SMR Congress the following week, there was an actual job offer in my inbox, along with the offer to sponsor my visa to move to France. So I took a shockingly long time to make that decision for somebody that was young, single, no children, had nothing really holding me back. But I was definitely really, conscious of the impact of uprooting what I thought I was already doing for my career and then making a total shift. And then all of a sudden one day I realized that my 16-year-old self would be really irritated if she found out that I was taking so long to say yes to the opportunity to move to Paris. So I said yes, and I went and I worked for a French research agency for a couple of years, and learned a lot and met a lot of great people over in the international scene, and became kind of more embedded within SMR and developed an even greater respect for what SMR does. Also got introduced to the IIX series of events back when events were things that you could do in person,
Yeah,
and that was
the good
a
old
really big
days.
part of yeah. Exactly. I mean, truthfully, I think a lot about, and maybe we'll talk about this at another stage, but I think a lot about young researchers today because for me, it was such an impactful part of how I developed my career and, how I learned was being able to see things on stage at events like SMR Congress and at, the IIX events. And yeah, so I learned, what I could, and then I thought, okay, well, I'm ready to move on from this role. And as is the case with many places, it's very difficult to find a job as a foreigner. So I was stuck at some point with a choice, which was either move back to the United States or work as a freelancer until I found something. So I just decided to pop up this little thing called MindSpark and work as a freelancer until I got myself a job. And I was taking on projects, but also interviewing. And then the project started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the interviews started becoming less and less and less frequent. And then at some point I said, well, geez, I'm making more and having more fun and working on more interesting things by myself than I probably could be doing if I were working as, I don't know, a research manager for TNS or something like that. So I
Yeah.
just decided to carry on as a freelancer. And then a couple of years later, I hired my first employee. That was 2018. And now we are almost a team of 10. And
Wow.
I used to be able to say headquartered in Paris, but in the I can't say post-COVID era. In the COVID era, I don't know if the word headquarters has any meaning anymore. So I'm based in Paris. Most of the rest of my team is based in Europe, not all of them. But yeah, so that's kind of how MindSpark was born. And then in terms of all of the other things I do, I don't know, they've all just kind of shot out from there. Getting more involved with SMAR, getting more involved with IIEX, getting more involved with the AQR, the Association for Qualitative Research. So
Mhm.
just trying to help move things forward where I can.
That's great. Actually, our stories parallel in many ways. So it
Oh,
kind of a
excellent.
similar path, but with stuff not being in a cool place like Paris. I'm in Georgia,
Hey,
but
Georgia's a cool place. I hear Georgia
it
did
is.
some cool things recently. So, I mean, and Georgia's always doing cool things. Got friends there. It's a
Yeah,
nice place to be.
it's home. So
Yeah.
the um, so that's actually that's really great, and thank you for sharing that. And I always love hearing any story of entrepreneurs. And I think people, there's two different types of entrepreneurs in my mind. There's the very purposeful, driven, this is the plan entrepreneur, and then there's the it just kind of happened.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, and I'm very much in that. Well, here I am. Here's what we're doing. So
Yeah, I
uh,
think there's a lot more of us in that category than people
I
think,
think
because
so.
a lot of times people say, "Oh, so like at what age did you realize you wanted to run your own company?" And I was like, "At the age that I did it."
Right.
I wasn't 6 years old sitting there like, "One day when I own my own company." That is not a thing that ever crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And in fact, even when I started working as a freelancer, I was sort of panicky at first. I thought, there's no way I'm going to make
Sure.
this. There's no way I'm going to be able to pay the bills. And I was just frantically just taking on any work that I could take on,
Yeah.
and just to try to have some sense of security while I looked for a job. And
Yeah.
now, people tell me all the time, well, now you're unhireable. And I'm like, well, I hope that's also not true, but let's see.
That is the flip side. Now,
Yeah.
that's actually an interesting point. Gosh, was it probably about 10 years ago? Uh, Kantar was looking for a global head of innovation,
Mhm.
and I was very far down the path in that conversation with them, and we both realized, you know what, I'm going to be a really shitty employee because I'm way too opinionated and
Yeah.
way too used to just calling the shots and doing my own thing. And we decided it wasn't a good fit, that I was unhireable,
Yeah.
that because I think that's the other thing that comes with confidence, right? As we go down this path and we start, building businesses and getting, becoming successful and growing into ourselves, that uh, that confidence makes it challenging to be part of an organization that has a hierarchical structure, right?
Hmm.
The I play well with others when but I don't take orders from others very well.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
you know,
There's a
I,
fine line.
there is. I'm not good at taking direction. So, which is
Yeah.
one reason
Well, good on
why
you for
I do better
recognizing it.
working for myself. Well, I think so. I wonder, is that, so just responding to that point that you had of, you're unhireable. No, I wouldn't think that we're unhireable. But there is a point that you reach in a career, and it sounds like you're at that point where there's, there's not a ceiling per se, but
Mm.
there is a place that you reach where you think, I know what the hell I'm doing now, and things get more interesting. The opportunities that, and I think that you're an example of this, from what I'm hearing, that start to materialize are about leveraging those leadership skills in new ways,
Right.
and that's where the growth comes from.
Right.
It's not about the role; it's about the opportunities to take what we've learned and express it in different ways. Is that,
Hmm.
yeah?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think people are always asking questions about, what's your leadership style, and what are the most important things to you as being, in terms of being a leader. And I think for me, the most important thing as far as being a leader is being able to always be self-aware. So being able to reflect back on myself and say, okay, what are my strengths, but also what are my weaknesses? What are the things that I
Yes.
need to work on? Because I do feel like I have a lot of confidence in certain areas, and there are other, areas where I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But actually, what confidence has given me the ability to just raise my hand and say, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Whereas the old me used to just say, I don't want to tell anyone that I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going
Yeah.
to try and really hard figure it out and then work myself into the ground or get myself
Yeah.
really stressed out. And so I think this idea of always learning and always being self-reflective are things that I think are really important and can be incredibly valuable as a leader if you are involved in an organization that's willing to leverage those things. There are
Yeah.
some things that there are some organizations that say, here's your marching orders, tally ho, and there are going to be people who are absolutely designed and made for those roles. And there
Yeah.
are people like myself who probably need roles where we're given a pretty serious amount of autonomy, and our if we do have people above us, like an executive leadership, person or something like that, that they know that our path to success isn't going to be a straight one, and that
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the kinds of things that interest me and challenge me, and I think that's also the reason why I get involved in organizations like SMR and like AQR, is because leadership isn't just about saying I will help get the task done. It's
Yeah.
also about being able to look at the big picture and say, okay, what are the opportunities for this, and what can I personally bring to the table?
Yeah.
And I really respect both people that get involved in leadership roles like SMART Council, and also the people who don't, because I think there's something really impressive and special even about the fact that some people recognize, what, I'm a doer. And we have this conversation a lot on my team, because I am a thinker. I spit out ideas all day long, and I just have
Yeah.
to surround myself with doers who take my ideas and make those things happen.
Yeah.
And being able to create that complementary, set of skills is the magic.
Yeah.
And I think that people who recognize, listen, I am going to, vote for the people on SMR Council or for the board on AQR based on what I think is their ability to bring something to the table, and I'm going to sit here and benefit from that membership, and I'm going to do what I can to help once I know, what the leadership is asking us to do. I think that's really, really important and really undervalued role in life, is the idea that there are people out there who do want a little bit of direction. They do want to be told a little bit, here's the path you can consider going on, and they thrive and flourish with a little bit of guidance, and I think that's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I call myself a gleefully recovering CEO, and because I'm not the CEO of anything right now, right, and haven't
Hmm.
for a few years. I mean, I'm a owner in multiple companies, and
Hmm.
uh, obviously a participant in the management team. But what I always like doing is just creating stuff, right? And
Yeah.
trying new things. I don't like administrating. I don't like being the administrative components of a business, and I'm not even particularly good at it, honestly. So yeah, uh, so it's
There
great to
are
have
few
that.
who are.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky to be surrounded by people who are, right.
Yep.
The kind of the three core businesses of GreenBook, Gen2 Advisors, and Barraglyph. My partners in each of those, they're very effective administrators. So
Mhm.
that's great. Like you run the business. Just let me go and do crazy weird shit, and
Mhm.
somehow that works.
Yep.
Um, so it, but a that was an eye-opening experience for me when I finally owned that, right? Because that's not how I thought of myself earlier in my career. I thought I'm a CEO, I'm a doer, I get it all done. And to recognize that, maybe, but I may suck at doing some of those things, so
Yep.
probably I shouldn't do them, right?
Yes.
And
Exactly.
let others. Yeah,
Yep.
that's fantastic. So you have yeah, you had a baby
I
earlier this
did.
year. Yeah, so
Yeah.
right in the lockdown. So you've had this wonderful experience of new motherhood in a global pandemic, which is probably a whole
Yay.
other topic.
It
But
is. Yeah.
yeah, but let's talk about that balance that you've had to achieve, because that's probably, wow. I mean, you're in a lockdown, you're a new mom, growing business, doing all these other things. So what's that been like? How have you balanced all that out?
Um, well, I think it's been really great. Um,
Okay.
There's a lot of people who say to me on a regular basis, "Oh, it must be so hard to have had a baby during lockdown." And I'm not going to lie, the baby hasn't met anyone in her family besides her
Hmm.
mother and father, except one grandparent who was able to come over from England. So my daughter's father is British, and so her grandmother was able to come over for 1 week in the summer, this past summer. Um, so that's obviously tricky. I'm an only child, so I think for my both of my parents, it's been a bit difficult to have their only grandchild be very, very
Hmm.
far away and no opportunity to meet her. So she's going to be one in a little over a month, and no one will have met her at all
Hmm.
before her first birthday, which is sad.
Yeah.
Um, but selfishly speaking, it's been great for me because she's been home and I've been forced to stay home. And the me as the CEO of MindSpark prior to this, I was taking more than 60 flights a year. And I remember thinking when I was something like, I think the last trip I took was, so she was born in March, and the last trip I took was in January, and I think it was to London. And I remember thinking at the time, like, how am I going to keep up this travel thing when I've got a baby? Well, the universe stepped in and said, I've got an answer to that. You're not going to. So I've been forced to stay home, and she has been forced to stay home. She's actually only just started creche a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, before that, we were both home. And then on top of that, I've been really, really lucky because my partner is a musician. So I say lucky. He says very unlucky because, as you know, I mean, there's not a whole lot of work for musicians right now. So he's actually been really fortunate because he's not only a musician, he also works as an audio engineer. So he has been picking up work doing podcast editing. Fortunately,
Okay.
podcasts have been really taking
Sure.
off. And
Sure.
as an audio engineer, he's got a really great ear and a lot of skill for that. So that's been great. But that's just stuff he can do
Yeah.
whenever, he can just do it, when she goes to bed. But it basically means that we have this sort of, reversal of the stereotypical gender roles. So I am the working, breadwinning CEO, and I've got a stay at home dad partner who's been looking after the baby. And I have to say that when she started creche a couple of weeks ago, I had this realization that wow, I didn't understand how much it was how what a positive impact it was having on me to be able to take a break during my day whenever I needed to. So first of all, she's also, I feed her. So I was every couple of hours making sure that she was fed. But in addition to that, if I had too many Zoom calls in a row, or if I, had a particularly stressful meeting, or, was working on a report and needed a break, I could just walk out and see my baby.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't have that ability. A lot of women, who do end up going back to the workforce, especially when they are, either their kid is in childcare because they don't have a partner to be able to help out with childcare duties, or because they work in a situation where they have to physically go into work. Like I think of nurses, for example. You can't see your baby whenever you've had a tough moment. You can't just
Yeah.
say, well, I just got, I don't know, shouted at by a doctor and I could really use a pick me up. I'm going to go hug my baby. I've been able to do that for the last 11 months. And I think that that's just been really special and unique, and something that it's shaped my view of the pandemic completely differently than a lot of other people who obviously have had really, really tough times for a myriad of reasons. And it hasn't been easy for me either. MindSpark, had its ups and downs, its way downs at some point in
Sure.
2020, and
You
we
too.
rebounded, fortunately. Yeah. But I also have this thing about being a mom, which is that, I've got a stay at home dad partner, and I can see my baby pretty frequently. Even now she's in creche, she's only going 3 days a week. So, a lot of flexibility there with spending time with her. And I think had this pandemic not happened, I wouldn't have experienced new motherhood in this particular way. It would have been completely different. So I'm quite fortunate.
That's a great perspective. We were joking beforehand of with kids being at home, and I did want to be a homeschooler, but the reality is that even during this period last year, right when they were at home digital learning,
Mm,
which we had never experienced before, that was probably one of the best times for our family
right.
that we had ever had. And similar to you, I work from home. I've always worked from home. I don't travel for a variety of reasons, so we at least didn't
Mhm.
have those complications. But to have that opportunity to actually be with our family all the time, uh,
Yeah.
good, bad, and indifferent, right? So with
Exactly.
different kids, uh,
Yep.
but actually was a blessing. So,
Yeah.
and certainly I can see in your scenario where absolutely how wonderful that would be just to have that experience. I mean, basically, it's a year of parental leave to an extent, right? So,
Precisely. Yeah, and I have to say that, all of my friends and people that knew me very well were always making jokes like, "Oh, Nikki's gonna have a baby," and then just like, back to work on day one. And I'm not gonna lie, on the day she was born, I was sending emails because, as I told you before we started recording, she
uh,
was born the second day of lockdown in France, and so I was scrambling to try to, salvage what I could about what was going on with the company.
yeah,
So yeah, I was working, but I was able to actually be that CEO that was still working a fair amount, but also still be with my family,
yeah,
which I think is the sort of thing that seemed impossible before this. And I think there's a lot of us. I know I just had this conversation recently with Jamin in Brazil. He was also saying to me, I didn't realize before this, how great it is to spend all this time with my kids, and I don't have to travel as much as I was traveling before. And I
yeah.
think a lot of us are having this conversation, like, yes, we miss travel. Yes, not the airplane stuff, but I love, interacting with my
Seeing people,
peers and
right? Just
yeah,
being with them.
seeing
Yeah,
people and just going to a new place. But, two things for me is one is I hope to do that with my kid, so for the next couple of years before she's in school, hopefully when travel happens again, I'm just going to take her with me because why not? And second of all, I don't have to travel as much as I was, and I can be a lot more choosy about where I travel, for whom, for which reasons, and for how long. Whereas before I was like, oh, gotta go here for 45 minutes. Okay. Whereas now it's like, do I really need to physically be there? I'm not sure that I do. So I think it's been a really, an eye-opening thing.
yeah. No, I agree, and interesting. Again, I've worked from home for 20 years, right? I've always built virtual businesses.
Hmm.
It was not common for me to have teams that I had never physically met
Hmm.
for many years. Um, so I've often wondered, why is this such a big deal? And now this is also from a guy who produces events, right? So I
Yeah.
certainly see the benefit of face to face. But then again, I've only attended the only event that I have attended physically for many years has been IEX North America. So
Hmm.
I didn't attend any of my other events. So
Hmm.
um, anyway, point is, the thinking about the future now. Now that we've crossed this digital divide, so to speak, right? That we were
Hmm.
forced to go down this path. Um, it will be interesting to see how if companies snap back to thinking that business is location specific or if it is person specific. Um,
Hmm.
I hope that most businesses find some balance, but overall play out to the role of, it's our business is not location specific. It is not a
Yeah.
necessity for us to be face to face and in person. For specific things, it is obviously, and there's
Yep.
going to be benefits to that. But for the most case, business to business, daily interactions, we can decouple from location. It's really
Yeah.
kind of irrelevant.
I
So
think I can't remember who shared an article about this recently, but I just saw an article yesterday about, I think it was Salesforce, that's actually just announced that it's offering, a mixed way of working when going back to work, is a thing. Because, there are also certain personalities that really struggle working from
yes,
home. They really feel isolated, they don't focus
yeah,
as well. And there are other personalities that are the exact reverse. And so I think one thing that's interesting is that, we're a lot of us are thinking about like, oh, should we be going back to the normal? But what may have been considered normal for many of us was torture for quite a lot of people. It
that's right.
was
Yeah,
commuting was very difficult for a lot of people. And then sitting in an office and, I'm not going to use the word introvert because I think it's more than that. And I think it's not just, introversion. It could be, different levels of accessibility or health issues or mental health issues or things like that, or just the ability where, the capacity to work, your brain gets turned on at 6 p.m. and that's when you're at your most creative, or that's when you're at your most efficient. Obviously there are certain things, as you said, where when you're collaborating and you're part of a team and you're doing certain tasks, then you may need to, have some kind of ways to work together that is, cohesive as possible for everyone involved. But you need to be thinking of the lowest common denominator. And I'm not sure that us having giant fancy offices and skyscrapers all over the world was ever, for the lowest common denominator. So I think it's kind of forced people to evaluate. And it sounds like Salesforce is one of those ones where they're allowing people to either, work fully remote, work fully in the office, or kind of do a hybrid approach according to their role and their specific needs, which I think is really admirable and great.
Yeah.
I think for smaller companies, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So for MindSpark, for example, once the pandemic hit, everybody besides myself moved out of Paris. So I'm now the only person in the city. So if somebody were to say to me, and I have had this conversation with somebody on my team, if somebody were to say to me, Nikki, I really don't do well working at home. I miss people. I need interaction. I need energy. I need buzz. I need stimuli. At the moment, the only thing I can do is say, well, when co-working spaces get back up and running again, let's get you a subscription to a co-working space, because the team has now dispersed to a degree that there's no longer an option for an office. But I think the bigger companies that employ millions of people really do have an opportunity to make work life better for a lot of people, and I hope they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so too. Well, and yeah, so we maintain on the GreenBook side, we maintain co-working spaces for our Seattle
Hmm.
team, which is the bulk of the team is the marketing and events team.
Hmm.
For that very reason, for
Yeah.
like you can go when you want to. If you have that need to be able to engage, then go do that. Because they're younger, and I think that's a piece of it as well. They thrive more on
Yeah.
that social interaction component of business life. Um, and I've often thought that'll be, if there is a saving grace for the impact uh, on retail space that has been so decimated, certainly here in
Hmm.
the U.S., that will be adopting those spaces to become more flexible, kind of co-working locations, or
Hmm.
micro hubs for different businesses. I think there's a path where they morph and shift into something different than they have
Yep.
been, that will be focused on that flexibility.
Yeah.
Because I hope that we do take that out of all of this, that the
Yeah.
flexibility and adaptation to people's personal style and needs is more important than a rigid kind of industrialized model that we have always employed in the past, because it's just how things were done. Doesn't mean it's the right
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
100%. And I think that there's no coincidence about the fact that this is happening in parallel with, as you say, the digital divide being crossed. And so, we're now having to think differently about the flexibility of how people work, but that's happening in conjunction with the fact that so many things are happening online. And we now also have to think about people's accessibility in ways. I mean, there are some companies that have been really like leading the charge in terms of accessibility, like Microsoft is a great example, making sure that their surveys are, friendly for all different types of users,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so I think that those two things are really related, is that we've been forced to think and look at and evaluate how people live their lives instead of just pretending we all do the same thing. We can all take a plane. We can all go into an office. Well, no, we can't. And now we can no longer, just pretend that what is cool for the CEO works best for everyone else too,
Yeah.
because it's simply not the case, and that has trickle down effects all the way down through research, where there's now loads of conversations, happening about accessibility as well, and how can we make sure that our qualitative discussions are more accessible to people from more backgrounds. Well, now they are, because people don't have to worry about coming into a city to go to a centralized location, to go to a facility to sit in a focus group for 2 hours. Now
Right.
they can join from the comfort of their own home, and they can take a bio break if they need to, or they can take their medication and not have to worry about driving, or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be. And these were
Yeah.
extreme limitations to research before. So, I think that obviously these things are happening in parallel, and they are some of the more positive things that we're seeing as a result of all of this, scary health stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Nikki. So I want to be conscious of time. I have a feeling you and I could probably go on for quite some time chatting about things. And actually, now that we finally broke the ice and did finally chat, I hope that we do it again, because I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, likewise. It was great.
Yeah. So congratulations on everything, on
Thank
motherhood,
you.
right? What huge accomplishment in a
Thank
pandemic.
you.
That's crazy. Um, MindSpark, SMR, AQR, all of those things. Um, I certainly, now I know why everybody has always talked about you got to talk to Nikki, because you kind of kick ass. So,
Oh, thank
um,
you. Likewise. No, seriously, all the buzz around you is merited. So,
no, well, yeah, depending on who you talk to, the some of that may not be quite so great. I know we have some mutual friends or acquaintances that would probably say, "Oh, yeah." Anyway, Lenny, good luck, Nikki. So anyway, but I'm glad we had a chance to finally chat. Um, I'm sure that we'll do it again. Matter of fact, I know that we're doing some stuff with AQR right now. I think talking about some partner opportunities with AQR. So uh,
yes, and we're talking about me helping out with IIX in Europe. I've got a call with your girls next week on Wednesday, I think it is, to chat about
yeah,
IIX Europe.
yeah, we're still thinking
Plugging
through
away,
what that looks like. Uh, you
as
know,
you should. I mean,
I think that virtual will continue to be a very large part of our lives, and certainly from a
hmm
GreenBook standpoint, our strategy.
hmm
But I think we're a pretty good ways out before live events return at the level that they were. So,
yeah.
um, so we're taking a cautious and realistic approach to that, and kind of thinking through what that schedule looks like. But the cool thing is, just real quickly, that the virtual events is really interesting. That oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
The uh, so the attendance is far higher than anything we could have ever achieved in person.
hmm hmm
So it's really, really interesting. Where the uh, so we see far greater attendance, in some ways greater engagement as well. But we're also kind of adapting to this Netflix world, right? Kind
Yeah.
of always on demand. So it's an interesting innovation challenge, which I appreciate as well, and kind of this new world of events. It's not going
hmm
to be the same as it was. What does a hybrid event look like? Anyway, sorry, now I went off on a long
No, don't be.
trying to
I'm
set
really
it up.
fascinated about
But
this topic and could easily chat with you for hours and hours about this very, very topic because I think it is important. And on the topic of accessibility, I think hybrid events have to be considered in the future because even if we do go back to full scale in-person events, we're ignoring a whole bunch of people who can't be there and want to be. So I think it merits further consideration for sure.
yeah, well, I had to stop traveling because of my neurological disease, right? I mean,
hmm
seizures and airplanes are a really shitty combination, as I
Yeah.
unfortunately discovered. And so although I would never, we always thought about we just need to make it Lenny proof. But while we made things Lenny proof, I was also really sad and bummed that I couldn't
hmm
participate in my events. So,
Yeah.
but it wasn't worth it from a travel standpoint, right? The risks associated with me traveling, just from a, yeah, again, seizures and airplanes suck. So
Yeah.
the uh, that was just not a fun thing. So I have to admit that I'm actually far I do like this new aspect of things. So, wow, now I get to actually participate and do things again, that I couldn't do for years because it just
hmm
didn't make sense for me to travel. So
hmm
anyway, whole other thing, blah blah blah. Nikki, this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today, and for the opportunities that we'll have again in the future. And I hope that you be well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and it was a great chat. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.